my team will tell you that one of the many annoying things about me is that I'm constantly frustrated and disappointed that we don't accomplish as much as I want to. And in preparing this Odyssey year in review, I was started in the mindset of, geez, we didn't do everything I was really hoping, and shucks, wouldn't it? It's a shame that we weren't able to accomplish more. But by the end of preparing this, I realized, wow, it's been a pretty remarkable year. And so much so that I had to tell Craig that I needed a little extra time today, because just actually even summarizing the accomplishments of what we've done is going to take a while. So much so that I got actually to turn up my ripsack ratio in terms of how fast I'm going to go through this presentation. But we do really have a lot to recognize, and I was trying to figure out the right way to summarize it for everybody and summarize all of our collective contributions. And so I decided just to, and I don't know if anybody else does this trick for themselves, but sometimes when I'm trying to think back about the year, it's helpful for me to open up my calendar and go back to January and just follow the calendar month by month and just try to see what happened, what accomplishments were made, and what highlights do we want to showcase. And so, and for those who are not familiar, the ripsack ratio is slides per minute, which for most rational people should be a number less than 1, but for some special people, it's a number much greater than 1. And so I'm going to see if I can keep at a pretty good pace here to get through everything. But I basically flipped back the calendar to January and just wanted to think back about all of the things that we've accomplished all the way up here till the middle of December. So going to get started with this. Encourage you all to enter in your own highlights in the thing. And I see that people are posting some things up there. So we'll be able to check in on that as we go. All right, here we go. So Odyssey's mission, we presented this on the very first slide of the very first meeting of the start of the year. It is to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. One of the things that I'm proud of this year is that we've made progress that's very much aligned towards this mission, which I think is encouraging. Now, the first meeting of the year, we talked about how we're going to collaborate together. We talked about collaborating in data standards, methods research, open source development, and clinical evidence generation. We talked about expanding our data network, and we talked about conducting network studies. And I think that these core opportunities for collaboration is still very much maintained since we talked about that at the start of the year. One of the things that I put up at the start of the year actually was this schedule of events. And what was interesting was at the start of the year, we had a few things earmarked as Odyssey activities for 2022. We had planned in January that there was going to be an Eden-ethon activity. We had announced that we were going to do Phenotype February. And we knew that Peter Reinbeck was going to host us for the Odyssey Europe meeting in June. But otherwise, the calendar was relatively barren of Odyssey coordinated activities, though I tried to showcase various other places in scientific conferences where there might be opportunities for collaboration. But looking back on this, it's kind of funny to think about all of the different activities we have done, given kind of at the start of the year, we were a relatively blank slate thinking about what we were going to accomplish. The other thing that I presented at the start of the year was an idea that I still feel quite strongly about, and I think we've made tremendous progress on, was that together as a community, we could engineer an open science system to build trust in the evidence generation process. And at the start of the year, I argued that we need to come together to create standardized specifications for all of our analyses. We need to have objective criteria for data quality assessment, for phenotype development and evaluation, and for analysis reliability. And highlighted this as an aspiration that we could try to make progress on, and throughout the year, we really did make good strides towards this. Also in January, one of the first accomplishments of the year was a release of our standardized vocabulary. And one of the things I realized is that our vocabulary team has continued to do a lot of great work to provide a community resource for our community. And yet each time I watch the forums or talk to someone, I realize that very, very few people are paying attention, close attention, to how frequently our vocabulary is actively being worked on and contributed to. And so I'm going to highlight throughout this presentation just the real depth of contributions that our vocabulary team made. But back in January, there was a major release of this that included various updates of both conditions and drugs in the vocabulary for everybody to take advantage of. So thank the vocabulary team for that. Also in January, we had a release of OHDSI version 1.2, and this was the first time that we include the CAPER application as part of OHDSI. This was also the month where we saw the still current release of method evaluation version 2.2, the OHDSI Web API version 1.3, and the self-controlled cohort package. So I want to thank Martijn and Gautam and JPEG for those contributions to our community. January also saw a range of publications that are highlighted for anybody who wants to check out all of the OHDSI publications. You can go to dash.ohdsi.org. But I'll just, as I go through each of the months, I'll just pull out a paper that I think is worth paying attention to in case you missed it throughout the year. Back in January, the paper that Ross Williams worked especially hard on was our Seek cover paper, which provided us a prediction model for evaluating COVID-19 severity. And what I think is actually a useful perspective about this paper is that we were able to train prediction models in a different population and externally validate on COVID-19 back when we actually didn't have much COVID-19 data. But also, this is the first time where I think we provided a very compelling nomogram for actually using a prediction model in practice. And we know that it was actually used during the COVID time. But it was nice to see this paper finally get out. And I think as a methodologic contribution, it's a quite nice accomplishment. Also great to see all of the collaborators across our community contributing to this publication. Now, running into February, we coined this Phenotype February, and it was a really fun month of focused on phenotype development and evaluation. Every day we showcased a specific disease and talked about methodologic issues about how to develop and evaluate phenotypes. We had lots of contributions from the community, including Aza and Joel and Alan and Gautam and Adam and Evan and Asia and Rupa and Jill and Erica and Tiffany and Juan. And so I want to a lot of the content that's out here actually, I think, still resonates as really important contribution. It really was the catapult for a lot of the work that our phenotype development and evaluation work group has been doing this year to try to cement this. And so I hope in 2023, we'll see another Phenotype February where we'll have even more active contributions from our community. February was also the first month that we held our first workshop leadership summit. And this was something that our steering work group had discussed, and Paul Nagy did a great job of coordinating, whereby we wanted to bring together all of the leads of the work group so that we could talk about how can we work together to support the community in making contributions aligned to our mission. As you can see here, we've got a lot of different work groups with a lot of different leaders. It was exciting this year that we saw new work groups come into the fold, including our eye care and vision research work group. We've seen the reintroduction of our patient level prediction work group, and just last month we saw the inclusion of our dentistry work group. But really the thing that I want to highlight here is that as a community, we need to be able to support each other in enabling activities within our different work groups. And so this was the first of 3 different workshop leadership summits that we tried to help our leaders in our community continue to meet their objectives and continue to grow the activities within their work groups, which was really successful. So I thank Paul for initiating and coordinating that for us. We had a bunch of great papers in February that came out as well. One that I want to highlight is a paper that was led by Ed Byrne, which was focused on background rates of thrombosis with thrombocytopenia in 6 European countries. A lot of OHDSI collaborators, all OHDSI collaborators here using multiple databases converted to the OMOP Common Data Model. Highlighting this paper because this was work that was specifically contributed to the EMAs thinking about this safety concerns associated with the vaccines, and it was valuable to get timely evidence out there. Also highlight that this paper showcased some limitations with how to think about phenotyping thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, which was also the genesis of more broader work that I'll highlight in just a little bit. In March, Claire Blacketer led a series of CDM workshops, and I want to thank Claire and Anthony, Melanie, Frank, Maxim for going through a series of activities. What was interesting is when I looked at the YouTube recordings that we had throughout the year, these were some of the workshops, these were some of the meetings that were actually most actively cited or most actively viewed across our community, demonstrating that there's still a need for us all to support each other as we're going through the data standardization process. Also, March, we saw another release of HADES version 1.3. This time, the Ensemble patient-level prediction package was added to the HADES toolkit, and that's still the current version 0.02, thanks to Jenna Reps. We also saw the latest release of Hydra version 0.3, thanks to Anthony Senna. We had a ton of publications that came out in the March timeframe. Just to highlight one, it was really exciting to see the work of our OHDSI APAC community. This paper led by Yuan Liu focused on characterizing combination therapies for hypertension, a logical extension out of the work that we had done in the Legend work. But here we saw data sources from Australia, South Korea, Singapore, China, Taiwan, as well as some data from the US and Europe, contributing to our understanding about how hypertensive drugs are actually being used. This is a real important milestone for our OHDSI APAC community to get this paper published out in JAMA Open. And I think it's really a good demonstration of things to come as our OHDSI APAC community has been driving forward with 4 new network studies across the community. We rolled into April, and Paul Nagy and Adam Black hosted our first OHDSI DevCon event. This was a virtual event where we had workshops, talks, and a panel to talk about how we really cultivate and grow our open source development community. I thought this was a really spectacular event because we got developers together to talk about what they're doing, where they need to go, and how we can collaborate. We also had multiple perspectives from large technology providers who provided very useful perspectives of how we could actually grow the community even further. This was also when Martijn provided a keynote, and he said that the core mission of OHDSI is just science, which is exciting because I've now kept that going in all of our podcasts. April was also the month where George, well, I've got that there. Where George introduced our sponsorship model for the OHDSI community. You know, we just talked about the central coordinating center and the work that's need to be done there. Still looking for continued support, but I want to highlight that that's now introduced and brought to the fold. April was also another major release of our standardized vocabulary, so shout out to our vocab team again. Here we had a major update release to RX Norm, as well as inclusions of some of the vocabularies used for the All of Us program. And this is only a couple months after that major release in January. I've noticed across folks, a lot of people aren't even keeping up with all of these continued releases of the vocabulary, but it's good to actually take note of them. They're all available out on Git, and you can see the releases under the GitHub repo of vocabulary version 5.0. April also saw the latest release of CAPR, thanks to Martin, version 1.0.3 still out there on GitHub. And this was also a major release for Atlas and Web API. Version 2.11.0 came out. This was the introductions of reusables and person counts. So I want to thank Ajit, Anton, Sergey, who I don't have a picture for, Chris and Senna for all of their contributions, as well as the broader Atlas development team for getting that version out there. We also had a bunch of papers published in April. To highlight one, Anna's paper, Characterizing Anchoring Bias in Vaccine Comparator Selection, was published in JMIR, Public Health and Surveillance. Highlighting this paper because I think that it's a responsibility we have as a community to not just think about how to conduct analysis, but how to actually really dig in deep to understand sources of error that can be introduced. And when we were all trying to figure out how to actually study the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines, there were a lot of open questions about whether or not we can treat our analysis the same way we've previously studied influenza vaccines or other types of vaccines in general. And Anna dug deep into really understanding that indeed treating the day that you got a COVID vaccine was really fundamentally different than the day that you got an influenza vaccine, particularly for those of us early in the pandemic who really were just at a random date going off to go get a vaccine whenever our town authority would allow us to. That actually has a profound impact on our ability to do confounding adjustments. So this is a paper that I encourage you to take a look at if you haven't. I think it has broader applications to our work well beyond vaccine surveillance. I think just this notion of how we pay attention to index data is really fundamental to most of our estimation work. May came along, and that was the month where Peter Reinbeck came to our community to showcase the work that's going on in the Darwin EU effort. We had a very large attendance for this meeting, really showing the appetite for folks to understand how we as an open science international community can make direct contributions, particularly to our colleagues and regulatory authorities. Peter highlighted the work of Darwin EU, which is an EMA effort to take advantage of real-world data to support regulatory decision-making, and the role that Erasmus MC has as the coordinating center for the Darwin EU efforts, and all of the OHDSI partners who are participating in this. They just last month announced the first batch of data partners who are part of Darwin. All have been converted to the OMOP Common Data Model. And I think there's an exciting opportunity for us to figure out how we can more fully, the OHDSI community can more fully support the Darwin team in contributing their work. And I certainly am hopeful to see open source development be a place where they are able to take advantage of the open source tools that are developed in our community so that they don't have to spend their time inventing their own tools and solutions for conducting analysis. May came around and we had yet another large vocabulary release. In this particular context, there was a wide array of different concepts associated with the oncology working group and trying to have cancer modifiers represented, as well as trying to formalize the way that we handle history data. And again, a major contribution by a broader team that doesn't get as recognized as much. We also saw more tools come out in May. Adam Black has taken over for our package for Andromeda, which is basically our package for doing large-scale data management across many of our different tools. And Andromeda version 0.6.1, our current release, was released back in May. A lot of publications that came out in May. Just to highlight one, our colleagues at the N3C Collaborative, led by Emily on this paper, looking at trying to understand how we can understand long COVID and applying models to the N3C Collaborative to try to understand whether or not we could predict who goes on to having some sort of long COVID visit. And they were able to identify models that were slightly predictive. Probably more encouraging, though, is to see collaborations across the N3C community using the OMOP Common Data Model. And I'm certainly hopeful that we'll see the N3C community taking advantage of more of the OHDSI tools as they continue to evolve their data resource and contribute. Also, shout out to Kristen here, since part of her DPhil is focused on thinking about more appropriate phenotyping for long COVID, which is an opportunity for us to expand both the methodology of phenotyping, but also try to provide some clinical evidence that's useful as we are all trying to come through the other end of this pandemic. June was a fun month for those of us who were able to get together in Rotterdam for the European OHDSI Symposium. The SS Rotterdam, shown there in the top left, was the venue that we're able to get everybody together, shown in the bottom right. And Peter Reinbeck and the Erasmus MC team did a wonderful job of hosting a series of events here. It was really great to see the progress that had been made, particularly in the European region. But it was also great to see the sincere desire to have more fostered collaborations and network studies. And Erica did a wonderful job of providing a day-long tutorial workshop after this, where we really try to provide some nuts and bolts about how to run network studies. And we've now started to see some of those network studies be initiated based on in the European community, based on finally being able to be together. Also, a big highlight for us to actually physically be together, which was our first big event after a couple years of all being behind our Teams meetings. In June, we also saw multiple open source releases. Mark had released Cyclops version 3.2. Frank had released Eunomia version 1.0.2, which are all the latest. Though I know in the case of Eunomia, I believe that we may even see a push before the end of the year to try to get this back in CRAN. Had a lot of papers that were published in June. One that I'd like to highlight specifically, going back to Ed Burns' paper, was the paper by Aza Shwaibi, published in Drug Safety, entitled Phenotype Algorithms for the Identification and Characterization of Vaccine-Induced Thrombotic Thrombocytopenia. And this was a large-scale OHDSI effort. As I highlighted before, Danny and Ed and the team really were kind of under the gun to get evidence to the EMA about what they could learn about thrombosis co-occurrent with thrombocytopenia, but that paper left a lot of open questions. And so Aza and the team did a great job in this particular paper of looking across a wide array of different databases across the US and Europe and Asia Pacific regions to really try to dig into understanding how often do we see different types of thromboses co-occurrent with thrombocytopenia defined in a wide range of ways. And I think that this paper is a real bellwether for how we need to be thinking deeply about how to do phenotype development appropriately. The ultimate conclusion of this paper is that clinical phenomenon we saw a few spontaneous reports for in the vaccines is really fundamentally different than what we are able to observe in observational data. And so the specific caution that we need to have is just because we can find some clinical idea in data doesn't mean that that clinical idea is really the clinical phenomenon that we want to study. And so sometimes it's actually important for us to be able to do this kind of deep dive to really better understand those types of phenomena. And I think one of the things we're learning in our phenotype work group is that there's a really important aspect about aligning a clinical description to the implementation. This was a good demonstration of why that's so necessary. July, we didn't have too many activities. I guess half the world decided to take a vacation, but we did have tons of papers that came out. And one of them that I want to highlight is Martin Shumi's paper that he led, which was the primary results from our large UMAIS experiment, paper entitled Vaccine Safety Surveillance Using Routinely Collected Healthcare Data and Empirical Evaluation of Epidemiologic Designs. It was published in Frontiers in Pharmacology. And one of the things that Martin did a really great job of was providing a large-scale evidence base where we examined a wide range of different types of studies, whether they be case control designs, cohort designs using a variety of different adjustment strategies, the historical comparator design that we've seen both the FDA and the EMA use, as well as variants of the self-controlled case series design and self-controlled risk interval design. And what we're able to show was across a range of different vaccines using historical data, we could see that each of these methods were subject to substantial bias, and all of them needed to have empirical calibration done before we could actually trust the statistics. I think this is actually a really important seminal work for the field. I don't think it's gotten as much visibility as it needs to, but what it did for me anyways, it scared me to death about our current status quo in doing vaccine safety surveillance, because this paper clearly demonstrated that across a wide range of different databases, different vaccines, we would generate false positives rates at a totally unacceptably high amount if we're not careful about how we use our statistics. And indeed, we've all just lived through an experience where there was various different scares associated with potential side effects of vaccines. And I think at least some of that could have been mitigated by us having a more nuanced use of statistical methods that our community really has been pioneering. So I encourage you all to take a look at this paper and think about this. I also think this is another example where these results for vaccines, I think, are much more broadly generalizable than just for vaccines. In fact, the results are largely consistent with previous benchmark studies that we've done in the OHDSI community that has shown that methods without appropriate calibration are going to be subject to unacceptable type 1 and type 2 error. All right, we got to July, so I encourage you all to go back to polleverywhere.com/PatrickRyan800 and make sure you enter in your thoughts. I see that we've got some folks that are highlighting the symposium, which we'll get to, Darwin EU, which we just talked about, getting to meet in person, Phenotype February. So I want to make sure that you all get your thoughts in and are able to vote for other ideas as we go along here. All right. From July, we went into August. One of the things that we kicked off in August, with a special thanks to FISA and Ross, our early stage researchers work group started a career speaker series. And the inaugural presentation from there was from our own Asia Golazar. And I think this is a great opportunity where in our community we can really support and cultivate folks not just doing good research, but also thinking about what it means to be a researcher and how we can support each other's professional development throughout our careers, whether that be in academia, industry, government, or elsewhere. And so that was really wonderful that FISA and Ross took the initiative to lead this effort. They've now had a series of presentations, not just from Asia, but by Jenna, Rupa, and Kristen. And they also coordinated a Meet the Mentor session at the OHDSI Symposium just a month later, which was a really great opportunity for connections between the early stage researchers in our community and those of us that are more grizzled veterans. So I want to thank FISA and Ross for that. Also in August, we showcased the Eden Academy, and Nige Hughes presented about the additional courses that have been added to the Eden Academy curriculum, and talked about how all of you can take advantage of that. One of the things that was very striking for me, using Paul Naji's OHDSI community dashboard, we can actually look at the users of the Eden Academy, and we can see that actually in 2022, we've grown to over 2,000 users of the Eden Academy, which I think is a really impressive thing to think about, given that we talk about our community of over 3,200 researchers. That's basically people who signed into Microsoft Teams. But we actually know that there's a lot more people in the community that are either using the OMOP Common Data Model, using the OHDSI tools, or just learning from the OHDSI community that aren't even part of that. And to see 2,000 users of the Eden Academy is quite impressive. I encourage anybody who hasn't yet gone in there, is looking for something to learn. I think there were up to 18 courses in the Eden Academy currently that are available, and I'm sure that we're going to continue to expand this resource as the education work group continues to evolve and push things forward. Also want to shout out in August at the International Society of Pharmacoepidemiology meeting, Danny Prieto Alhambra was awarded a special award for his contributions to public health associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. That's a picture of Danny and his team at Oxford. Shout out specifically to Danny, but also, as Danny highlighted, this was a contribution based in part by Danny's leadership within our community and our collective contributions that we made to supporting the pandemic. August came around and we had yet another major vocabulary release. The vocab team did a great job of putting together a release where we updated SNOMED and also tried to revise some of the conventions that were associated with things. This was actually pretty substantial work to get this particular version out, and there was quite a lot of changes that were made in there. And so for those of you who are still sitting on your 2-year-old vocabulary, maybe it's time to think about an upgrade. August, we also saw multiple open source tool releases that are still in their current version. Cohort Method version 4.2.3 is out there. I don't know where oh, there they go. There you go. Martin just gets to be a special shout out picture of himself. He was busy in August after his vacations because he released Cohort Method version 4.2.3, Empirical Calibration version 3.1.1, and Self-Controlled Case Series version 3.4.0. These are all the current versions, though I know that Martin's trying to actively push even additional versions out of Cohort Method and Self-Controlled Case Series to work with strategists. But these packages are some at the heart of our Hades ecosystem. For anybody who's doing any population level effect estimation, you're probably going to be using a comparative cohort design or a self-controlled case series design. And I would assert strongly that these are the most robust tools that are available anywhere in the world to try to conduct those studies. So I encourage you to take a look at these tools. Had multiple papers come out in August. The one that I want to highlight is Joel Swerdell's work, Phi Evaluator 2.0, methodologic improvements for the Phi Evaluator approach to semi-automated phenotype algorithm evaluation, that was published in JBI. Thing that was excited about this work was innovating the algorithm for how to do probabilistic, establishing a probabilistic reference standard to evaluate phenotypes. Showed that we were able to, when comparing to a benchmark of previously validated studies, we're able to get estimates of specificity and positive predictive value within 5% of what we would consider the gold standard of having humans manually go review charts. This is an exciting paper to see the progress being made in that space. Still think there's a lot more work to be done in phenotype evaluation, but I appreciate Joel's diligence to continue to push forward in at least this direction. September rolled around. It was exciting for us to have an Eden pharmacovigilance study-a-thon that was held in Uppsala, Sweden. So in the one of our Eden activities is specifically to think about how real-world evidence can support pharmacovigilance, whether that be signal detection, validation, or evaluation. And Uppsala Monitoring Center is really at the cutting edge of thinking about how to appropriately analyze spontaneous adverse event reporting data to identify new safety signals that should be communicated to the regulatory authorities. And the task on the table here in this Eden Study-a-thon was to think about how could real-world evidence help Uppsala in doing better safety monitoring. One of the things that I thought was most exciting, and I'm going to play this video hopefully with the sound. One of the activities that they do at the Uppsala Monitoring Center when they do their signal detection sprints is when they identify a safety issue, they ring the gong. And so that's Danny and Martijn being able to ring the gong together. The reason why I show that is I think it's actually I think it is very significant that here we are not just doing theoretical methodologic research, we're actually finding real safety issues that are not identified that need to actually be properly vetted because they potentially could directly impact the lives of patients all around the world. And so this was, I think, an important moment in our community to really try to make real-world evidence pushed into that safety space. So I thank Nicholas and the team for hosting us and for having a great event. Just got to play it again for the fun. All right, September also had releases of open source tools. We saw new releases of database connector evidence synthesis from Martijn, as well as Mark's introduction of the iterative hard thresholding package at version 1.0.2. This allows us to train models where we can specify the number of features that we want to go into a model, which is actually pretty interesting, particularly going all the way back to Ross Williams' paper on seq cover, where one of the challenges was to figure out how can we create a parsimonious model for us to be able to train. So Mark's innovation here is something that really can drive in that space. September also saw a lot more publications come out from our community, highlight Lingying Zhang's paper published in JBI, adjusting for indirectly measured confounding using large-scale propensity score, where she provided a nice foundation for understanding that when we apply our large-scale propensity score approach, where we throw in all conditions, drugs, procedures, measurements, even if there is such a thing as an unmeasured confounder, as long as that unmeasured confounder has some sort of correlation with something that we've observed, then we may actually be in good shape in terms of reducing bias. And this was a nice demonstration of this following on work that Yuxi Tan, Martijn had previously published, but I think providing a firmer foundation, particularly with understanding pinpoint ability. And so I encourage you to read that paper. And also Lingying presented just last week about this paper, so I encourage you to take a look at her presentation on that as well. Of course, we rolled into October. This was our OHDSI 2022 Global Symposium. I know Craig is super happy that we finally got a picture coming not just from Europe, and I think it's a pretty wonderful picture. Specific shout out to Andrew Williams all the way back here, even though he was actually standing here. That was not a slight to Andrew. That was just magic of PowerPoint. But it's really great and exciting to see everybody actually together and for us to all be together from all around the world to have this event. At the OHDSI Symposium, we were able to take stock of the community and what we've done together that George highlighted. We were also I appreciated us having our colleagues from the FDA being able to showcase what they are doing to support vaccine safety surveillance. Martine presented on objective diagnostics, which we tried to do a replay of just last week. And then we showcased some of the work that we're doing around the world to support regulatory authorities. It was also great to have a variety of lightning talks where we were able to see presentations from early stage researchers, from industry, academia, government, from US, Europe, Asia, all coming together and showcasing really exciting work. Also, we built some Legos. That was fun. All right. The next day, we actually held a new type of OHDSI tutorial where we tried to walk through the entire journey from data to evidence. Aside from the fact that the room was somewhere approximately 125 degrees when we started, and it was not just the hot air that I was pouring into the room, we did get through a good tutorial that provided everybody a little bit of a taste of all of the different components. So thanks to Asya, Kristen, Jenna, Claire, Melanie, Gautam, Martine, and George for being faculty of this course. All of the material is now publicly available. So if you missed it and are just interested in getting a quick run through everything, it's a great place to start. OHDSI, October was also when we released our journey, our 2022 a compendium of everything that's going on. So a big shout out to Craig for all of the hard work that he does for our entire community, but specifically as it relates to putting together this very nice book. A couple things to highlight in that book that we try to do to compile summaries of what we've done in the community. This is our annual inventory of data around the world. We now have over 450 data sources in 41 different countries, collectively representing over 928 million unique patient records, conservatively estimated. That's 12% of the world's population. And while that's super exciting in terms of where we've grown to, I think it really should shine a light on the obligation we have to try to take advantage of this data to learn as much as we can to impact the lives of patients all around the world. And as much as we're excited to see how much of the world is covered in with our yellow cells, we can also see that there's a lot of the world that's not yet represented. And so I look forward to seeing even more growth and contribution there. And as it relates to that, it's also a place for us to summarize the work that we're doing internationally as it relates to all of our regional chapters. This year, we saw tremendous growth in terms of participation in our Africa chapter. And in addition to our existing chapters from Australia, China, Europe, Japan, Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, also welcomed our colleagues from India and kicked off the new India regional chapter. And we're really excited to have them joining not just our OHDSI APAC community, but the broader global community at large. And there's tremendous opportunity for us to collaborate there. All right, October also brought another standardized vocabulary release. Another shout out to our team that's been working diligently here, trying to make sure that we were keeping procedure vocabularies up to date, particularly as it relates to procedures and drugs and all of the evolving science that's associated with management and treatment for COVID-19. October also saw a release of Hades versions 1.4. This included the introduction of the phenotype library. It also was the month where we saw the latest release of Cohort Generator version 0.7. The deep patient level prediction package version 1.0 was introduced. Patient level prediction version 6.0.8, as well as a major release of Atlas Web API version 2.12. And so again, shout outs to Senna, Aik, Jenna, and the entire Atlas development team for all of these contributions, and encourage everybody to be looking for the latest releases of that. And somehow Anna's picture magically popped up because Phoebe 2.0 is now fully integrated in Atlas, which should be a game changer for how we think about phenotype development. October also saw lots more papers come out. One that I'd like to highlight that was presented just last week, Vaclav Pavas presented about the OMOP-CDM transformation for the UK Biobank. This was published in JAMIA. And this is a really nice paper, both because UK Biobank is a resource that unfortunately too many in our community have been running our own separate ways to develop an ETL, and we really should be coming together as one community to build one common ETL. but also because this paper provides a nice runway to show a standardized process for walking through any ETL using all of the OHDSI open source tools. And so this is really nice to see that out there and to see a direct contribution for one data source that hopefully others can benefit from, but also to provide a nice roadmap for how others about similar types of data could walk through a similar process. All right, we rolled into November, and we hosted our colleagues at the Taipei Medical University and Jason Su and team hosted the OHDSI APAC Symposium, which was really wonderful to actually get everybody together in the OHDSI APAC region. It was great to hear about the progress that's being made across all of our regional chapters, but also the excitement to see kind of at a national level in Taiwan, excitement about what it could mean to actually truly enable collaborations across multiple hospitals and health systems in the country. We also saw in November releases of Hades version 1.5, which brought forth the introduction of Cohort Explorer, as well as the latest release of CIRCE R version 1.2, thanks to Chris. Also, want to shout out that November was the month of AMIA, where our own George Ripsack was recognized with the Morris Cullen Award, and it was a wonderful time to be able to celebrate all of his contributions to the field of informatics at large, but also recognizing his leadership in our community, which was also part of that recognition. So congratulations, George. November saw more papers come out. One that I'd like to highlight was a paper led by Nige Hughes, came out in JAMIA Open. It was entitled Evaluating a Novel Method to Stimulate Open Science Collaborations, a case series of study-a-thon events within the OHDSI and European IMI communities. Study-a-thons was an idea that we had to bring a whole bunch of people together and have concentrated focus time to deliver research. And this is worked to some extent in our community, but also there's a lot to learn about how we can collaborate more effectively. And I thought that this was a nice, honest appraisal of trying new ways to do collaborative science. And so I was appreciated that Nige was able to push this through. So now we're here in December. We're only 13 days into the month. And today is the deadline for our OMOP CDM ER diagram challenge. This is an activity that I hope will, or I know will produce tangible output as something that we need for the community. We've also already seen great contributions from multiple people in the community. And I know that Claire and the team are going to have a hard time making a choice about a winner, but that winner will be revealed next week. We've already had multiple accomplishments, though, even though we're only less than halfway through the month. Hades version 1.6 has been released this month already. Fee Valuator, which we talked about Joel's publication only a few months early, is now officially part of the Hades ecosystem, as well as current releases of Cohort Diagnostics, Cohort Explorer, Parallel Logger, Phenotype Library, Fee Valuator, SQL Render, as well as the latest version of data quality dashboard. So thanking Martine and Gautam and JPEG and Katie for all of their contributions on all of these open source tools that we all benefit from. Oh, and Joel apparently. All right, and while we're only a couple weeks into December, where there's already been multiple publications that have come out, the one I want to highlight is a paper in military medicine, just because I think it's really cool to think about we have a paper in military medicine. But this is a paper by Veronica and Scott, and as well as colleagues, which is actually a really nice paper that I encourage you to take a look at. In the US, our Department of Defense manages all of our active enlisted folks in the military, and our Department of Veterans Affairs handles the healthcare associated with those patients after they are no longer in active duty. But of course, there's a transition between when you're a person in the DoD and when you become a person in the VA. And by using the OMOP common data model, they've been able to create one continuous data resource that continues to follow the healthcare of these patients. And so it's a nice paper demonstrating the value of linking two different data sources together. I think Kevin Haynes probably on the call and is super excited to see a data linkage project. But this is a really nice demonstration of how this can actually really have a profound impact in this particular case in a population that deserves for us to do everything we can to improve the healthcare and lives of these patients. So we only have 5 minutes left, which is kind of okay. Just to highlight where we are in aggregate, I just walked you through January through December. Want to highlight again our OHDSI dashboard with thanks to Star and Paul. You can see that this has been a remarkable year. If your metric is publications, we had over 100 papers that were published, which is the most we've ever had as a community. And we're also seeing that the number of citations to our work continues to grow, which is super exciting. I think a more indirect metric that I'm probably personally more excited about is the second metric we look at as it relates to papers, which is number of new authors, people who are participating in co-authoring some paper that's somehow connected to our OHDSI community. And here you can see that we're still on an exponential growth here. We're seeing now in 2022, we had over 600 new authors contributing to our community, producing scholarship and publishing it in some way, shape, or form. And so that this growth is something that certainly gets me really excited as we think about 2013 and moving forward.